Hey everybody, welcome back to Backlog Banter. I'm your boy Abram, joined as always by Mr. Tucker Hazel, and we're here today for a very peculiar
Very? Oh,
discussion.
man, I thought you'd
Uh,
done another very. I'm a little bit disappointed.
well, I don't want to be hyperbolic.
That's true. That'd be taking it too far.
We are here today to talk about the March 27th Nintendo Direct, and the, let's just say, multitudes it contains.
Yeah,
Tucker, let's get right into it. I think we have a lot to talk about, despite there being
very
I'm going to
little.
say a
Yeah,
little to show.
yeah.
Can give me your 40,000 feet view of
Ah!
this presentation we just watched,
That's
Mr.
me
Beast.
falling from 40,000 feet. Ah! Because
Yeah, you wouldn't
I'm
be thinking about the
terrified.
direct if that was happening.
um, yeah, look, we're sickos, and so we got things that we're excited for.
Yeah,
But unfortunately, those things have pretty massive asterisks on them, and this direct shows that Nintendo is in a very different kind of place marketing wise than they ever really have been, especially not for the last couple of years where things have gotten more and more consistent. This is one of the weirdest directs we've ever gotten, if not the weirdest, for many reasons. And primarily that there were no games announced for this year. Which is
yeah. I mean, we got to
insane.
set the table, right? We came into this direct with nothing dated
Yeah.
for Switch One, and
This direct that we just found out about. The
yeah,
rumors only started a couple days ago, and it was announced yesterday.
and the justification that we gave for its existence in our predictions video was that Nintendo needs to illustrate to Switch One players what they're going to be playing on Switch One this year if they don't
We were
upgrade to a Switch
so
Two.
wrong in our direct video. I mean, just absolutely nothing of
No.
today's what actually showed up today. We didn't talk about a single thing.
And how does it make you feel?
Uh, I mean, I like it when Nintendo.
Yeah.
This is. I think this is just only the surprise part of the surprise and delight Nintendo mantra.
I mean,
it was
delighted.
surprising.
I was delighted.
No, you're right. You're right. I was delighted a couple of times, but I find that delight quickly fading, I guess, because
Sure.
it then sets in the reality of what this direct actually told us, which was very little of even close to imminent.
Yeah.
This direct is technically won't be relevant for a year for things like the things of actual like substance that it showed. Discounting the like non-game stuff, the game sharing and Nintendo Today,
Which
the
we'll
app,
talk about.
which those are more imminently relevant, but they're also so strange and ethereal. It's hard to sort of pin down my feelings on them until I get a little bit better sense of how they actually impact me as a member of the Nintendo community. But this direct won't feel important until at earliest middle of this year, or even maybe late this year.
Yeah, I mean, it was remarkable. I think
Yeah.
that was a remarkable Nintendo Direct.
Yeah.
In just an objective sense of the term remarkable. Now we're really not going to talk about much of the third party stuff. Mostly because I think most of it looked boring. I don't even remember what most of it is.
I thought it was pretty poor, to be honest. I mean,
Yeah.
like, and there were some things that we were hearing in terms of rumors and like ESRB leaks and things
Yeah.
like Plants vs Zombies and Sims, things that I think would have added a little bit more third party pomp to this direct. But it was a lot of smaller games, which I'm not opposed to, but a lot of smaller games and a lot of smaller
JRPGs.
scale third party things and JRPG things.
Farming.
And then even within that section of, I think, a very limited and rather poor selection of third-party games, almost none of them are dated. And so we're talking about, if you are a Switch 1 owner thinking this is going to give you some sort of idea of what you're going to be playing, the answer is, for the average player, probably absolutely nothing, to be honest. Like, and you are already aware of and probably excited for Pokemon primarily, but Metroid Prime 4, which we're both showing off today and we'll absolutely talk about. But outside of that, this year is bleak for Switch 1 owners, because we're also starting the year off with a much lighter cadence of releases, 2 remakes in Donkey Kong and Xenoblade, both of which are niche in their own ways. And so the track record is not looking very solid as set by this particular Nintendo Direct.
Yeah, I mean, I remarked to you and Bo and Dan, who we watched this with, that it really did.
Abram, you're remarkable.
Thank you very
You are
much.
able to remark.
That it really felt like Nintendo retrofit a partner showcase.
Yeah. A pretty bad one.
Yeah, into a Nintendo Direct. And there are a couple things we'll talk about. We'll talk about the PlayStation stuff for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll give a quick just passing shout out to that new beat 'em up from Tribute Games, and
looks good.
the Marvel one looks awesime. Love Shredder's Revenge.
No, actually, quick thing about that, they did a Shredder's Revenge, which is a Turtles beat 'em up. They're doing a Marvel beat 'em up, which is kind of like Marvel's X-Men because it's got Captain America and Wolverine in it and Storm. The next pillar to fall is a Simpsons beat 'em up by Dotemu and Tribute.
Fair. Imagine.
But, I think it's very possible. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think it is too. I mean,
they're working with Disney.
That's true. I think that my philosophy on Nintendo Directs tends to differ from yours in that, to me, the Direct is merely a vehicle to deliver specific pieces of information to me.
Yeah.
Basically, as soon as the show ends, I'm not really thinking about the composition of the show so much as I'm thinking about the hopefully 3 to 5 things that captivate me. And I got that 100%, but I'm not getting it anytime soon.
No.
And I agree with you. I think that it's an issue in a manner of speaking, but it's more for me a curiosity. I mean, the way I think about this is that we've been talking about this Direct in some respects as a bonus, as a 2 cake situation.
Yeah.
And
I don't know if they actually delivered that second cake.
Well, the reason I bring this
they're going to deliver this cake in like a year.
Is that we're both in the fortunate position to where whatever is shown off in the Switch 2 Direct next week, we're gonna buy, we're gonna play. Our year, ultimately, what happened here was irrelevant because we're going to both have a Switch 2 on day 1, and we're gonna be playing everything there. But that's not the reality for a lot of people, particularly just in the wider economic climate of the moment. And so I thought that bearing that in mind, Nintendo was going to be wanting to aggressively keep this player base interested. And what's interesting to me is that they're not, at least as of right now, trying to do that almost at all.
Absolutely not.
What they're delivering at this point is obligatory games, because think about it through this lens, Tucker. We expected that ZA and particularly Metroid Prime 4 would be out by now. It's interesting to think about if there's an alternate world where both of those games made it into 2024, where there truly was nothing for Switch 1 past Xenoblade.
Sure.
And obviously it's an alternate timeline we can never understand, but I just think it's interesting that Nintendo
Okay, just did.
is clearly trying to make it clear that this year in the Nintendo ecosystem
is about Switch 2.
It's about Switch 2 and only Switch 2. Not a 3DS and Switch style situation. It's actually most similar to the situation that DS owners were in, where there was so little. I think there's like 3 Nintendo published DS games in 2011. And mostly it was on 3DS. It was about Nintendo propelling its audience into this iterative next system, opposed to hedging bets by keeping the last and more discrete piece of hardware busy. They're saying it's time for Switch 2. And in this Direct, while they said we're not going to talk about Switch 2, I think they really did. I think that the app and I think that the game sharing are going to suddenly make a lot of sense. And we even know that the app is going to be used for daily pieces of news about Switch 2 after next week.
Yeah.
So I think that this was priming the pump to say, hey, look, we have a long-term vision for Switch 1 still. There are going to be some games in 2026, but for the most part, you want to go over and you want to get on Switch 2.
Absolutely. And they seemingly have a long-term vision for the 2 major games that they announced today that we're going to probably spend most of this discussion talking about. But what it seems like they don't have is a short-term vision for the Nintendo Switch 1. It is very likely, I would say over half likely, that there is not a Switch 1 game for an entire quarter of this year. It is possible that a EPD4 game of some kind, a smaller game, sort of partner showcase kind of game, it gets shadow dropped or just announced on Twitter or even on the Nintendo Today app at some point within the next 3 months. But that feels odd and unlikely given how much news we are going to be having in about a week. And this would have really been the time to tell us, if you are a Switch 1 owner, here is a game from Nintendo that you can play Xenoblade came out about a week ago, and we have no dated games. Metroid Prime 4, we'll talk a little bit about that, being question marks of when that would come out or how it is in relation to Switch 2. ZA is probably not until the end of the year holiday. And so we may be looking down the barrel of a 3-4 month chunk, maybe even longer if you're thinking only Switch 1, or Switch 1 exclusives, because if Prime 4 is cross-gen, that's a little bit different. Not really, but where there's just nothing. And that is what's really odd to me. And it will have meant that if the next game we get is like the Switch 2 launch lineup, that I wouldn't have played a Nintendo published game for 8 months, 9 months at that point, which is easily the longest I've maybe ever gone since I started buying Nintendo games without getting one of their new games, which is just really interesting because they've been so good at a consistent release cadence and pacing things out, and it seems like they're just so focused on Switch 2 that they think they can just make up for that, which I think is probably true, but it's weird to have it be that transparent.
Yeah, I mean, the industry analysis, I forget what firm put it out recently, but was that like the Switch 2 could be doing something silly like tracking for the biggest console launch ever, or whatever, right? To be clear, the Dreamcast had the biggest console launch at its time, right? So a launch doesn't mean anything necessarily.
Oh, of course, in terms of long term,
It's about sustainability, right? And it's very possible that Nintendo said, hey, look, part of what made us successful in 2017 is that we had a constant string of releases.
Yeah, totally.
And one thing we were talking about in the video yesterday was that, well, in Switch 1, we can see these smaller partner teams, anything from a WayForward to an Arc System Works to a Arzest and etc., would fill in the gaps in Switch 1. But maybe the answer is actually they're filling in gaps in Switch 2.
Yeah.
And that's
which for us would be way better, but
yeah, I mean, that's also an interesting point that I'm going to be curious to see how the community sentiment shakes out on over time. This question of disappointment around a game being on Switch 1 versus Switch 2, and how we feel about that. I mean, I was one of those people that was very disappointed when Samus Returns and WarioWare Gold and these other games were on 3DS.
Yeah,
but I think there was
Ultramoon instead of Stars.
Yeah, I think there was
which was never a real game, and that was funny.
There was never a real game. There was more of a reason to be upset by that.
Yeah.
But let's talk about some of the actual things we saw here, right, from Nintendo. Let's talk about Metroid Prime 4.
Sure.
Because I think the game looks outstanding. I think it is really, for me, as a hardcore Metroid fan, as somebody who loves the entire Prime trilogy, it looks like exactly what I was hoping for, which is at once something that's very familiar, that is not seemingly compromising on the tenets of what made those games so unique.
Not at all.
But is simultaneously introducing new ideas that are going to iterate on that framework in an interesting way. And obviously that latter part is going to come in the form of these psychic abilities that we've seen that are demonstrating a type of puzzle that really is not what you anticipate from a Metroid game, because we're so used to a small traditional arsenal. And sometimes there's, the Prime games introduce their own gimmicks, right? But this seems a lot more integrated into the gameplay, than something like the PED suit in Prime 3, where it feels more like a gimmick. It seems like the psychic elements here are a fundamental aspect of combat, of puzzle solving, and that really excites me. I think it's going to push beyond kind of the new but superfluous ideas that games like 2 and particularly 3, even though I love them, introduced and kind of didn't take to their natural conclusion. I think this looks like a really great step forward while still clearly being the sequel we've waited almost 20 years for. Here's what you think, though, because you're not a Metroid Prime fan. Did this engage you?
I like this trailer quite a bit. And the psychic abilities are, I think, not to the same degree, but they are similar to the second trailer Cappy reveal for Mario Odyssey, or the second trailer Mouthful Mode reveal for Kirby the Forgotten Land, where there is a new gameplay X factor here that will change the way that puzzle solving, exploration, and combat, this is true for all 3 of these games, that we weren't aware of in the first time we saw the games. Half mud. And I'm really looking forward to that, because the problem that I had with Prime 1, which is the only one that I've ended up playing, and I didn't even complete it, is that it felt very traditional to me. And of course, I played Prime Remaster. I did play the original Prime 1, but this is a 25-year-old game. Like I'm not making bones about it feeling a little bit older because it literally is, but I like the idea of being surprised, which I certainly was not by Metroid Prime. I had played Metroid games previously, and those translated into 3D. Getting the missiles and getting Morph Ball and these power ups I got those in Fusion and Zero Mission and Super and Dread. I'm like, I know what to expect. The great thing about the psychic abilities, I think they showed off maybe 2 of them, maybe 3 in this trailer, is that we don't know what kind of abilities you're going to get and how they will impact the flow of combat, the way you're interacting with enemies, the way you're solving different kinds of puzzles, exploring the environment. There will probably be movement option ones. There will probably be things that act more as keys, ones that are more combat oriented. And I think it will make the game feel like a markedly different gameplay experience because they're integrating new ideas. And so that definitely makes me a lot more excited for this game. Yeah. All we had seen from that first teaser trailer last year was very straight down the line traditional Metroid Prime. Some scanning, some morph ball, a little bit of shooting. That's it. This showed us that and showed us there's a little bit more. It's not a complete reinvention, but it is enough of a step forward to I'm like, all right, it seems like they are taking in stride the fact that it has been 15 years since the last one, and we do need to make some sort of step forward in order to keep things fresh and make it feel like something new. So psychic abilities, all in on that. Also, the red suit is fucking sick.
Yeah, it just looks really good. I mean, I'm very happy with it. I want to watch the trailer a couple more times because, well, I mean, it was compressed and I had a little bit of an audio delay. Yeah. We had sort of a scuff setup for how we were watching, but to me, it looks like Retro delivered again. It did, in terms of fidelity, being at the apex of the hardware as they have been on GameCube and Wii. Yeah. I just think that they're back, and this trailer did a lot.
They're so back.
It did a lot to kind of put to rest some of the fears I might have had about the ideas that maybe Retro their part. I can't think of a different word, but their prime was behind them, right? But I don't think that that's the case. I think this looks excellent. And I think Mouth Mode is an apt comparison because it recontextualized a core tenet of Kirby's gameplay in a subtle but importantly different way. And that's what it looks like the abilities are doing here. So I obviously can't wait. I'm actually not positive I've ever been more excited for a game than Metroid Prime 4.
I actually think that, I mean, I can just draw another comparison. I just popped in my head. This is kind of similar to the way the runes were in Breath of the Wild. Is like they were kind of the items from previous comparison. Zelda games, but because they were more permanent and they were combat and puzzle solving, all this stuff. It does seem like Nintendo has this interesting sort of recontextualization of progression in their games that I think has made all of them feel substantially interesting. And I've not only loved all those games, but personally vastly preferred the ways that Cappy is an evolution on the power-up system, and Mouthful Mode is a evolution of the copy abilities. And so, I mean, I like upgrading Samus in these games. I love Metroidvanias and getting a new ability that allows me to approach the environment in a different way. And that's one of my favorite things about the Metroid series. And so, then putting an extra spin on that and making it not predictable is another thing that, for me, has been something that I've had somewhat an issue with the Metroid series, is feeling like they are structured quite similarly, and I can kind of predict which bosses I'm going to face, which areas thematically I'm going to explore, and especially which abilities I'm going to unlock, of course, in the game. And this seems to be subverting not only from the abilities, but also this is much more of a and frankly, Avatar, James Cameron's Avatar looking world that feels very different from the locations of other Metroid games. So I am looking forward to this game, and this definitely increased my excitement. And then they decided not to date the game, and that adds 20 different asterisks and question marks on it.
I want to talk about that. There's one other analysis thing I wanted to just say, and then we'll talk about that. But I like what you're saying a lot, because I think an issue you would have had with Prime 2 is that they have more traditional Metroid power-ups in there. Like, you get the screw attack in that game, but it's so limited, and when you activate it, you're locked onto the plane you're traveling down. And what it felt like to me sometimes playing that game is that they wanted to do more, but they were trying to stick so close to the formula of 2D Metroid that the translation didn't quite work as well as it did in Prime 1. And so this looks like they're saying, okay, what can we really do to take cues from the massive influx of physics-based first-person puzzle games that we've gotten in the wake of Prime, and in part because of Prime. And so I think it feels like a really good full circle evolutionary step forward. But my jubilation was brought down a notch, as you're saying, Tucker, because the game has no date.
Which can either be a good or bad thing.
Personally, I don't think the game is in any trouble, because it's not just they showed a trailer and like got the fuck out of there. They gave us a proper piece of key art. They gave us the box art. They did a whole drop of high-res stills. I mean, the game is, in my view, certainly done at this point, or being polished. The question then is when is it coming? I was bullish that we're going to get it soon, like in May. Now that might still be true.
Well,
But personally, I would have, if they had dated it and said this game is coming out, as Metroid games have tended to do in the past, in September or October, I would have been perfectly happy with that, because then I would have known what we're working towards. But what we remain in now, which is so frustrating, is a will they, won't they debate about if this game is on Switch 2 or not.
We have 6 days.
Yes, which is good, because it's going to answer this question once and for all. We were both.
Can you imagine how frustrating it would be if that question was? Well, I mean, it kind of has been left hanging for a while, and certainly the conversation has indicated that. But yeah, the question mark then becomes, because they didn't even put a like season or a month window on this, or a late. They didn't even put that much information. Is if it will be a specifically a launch title, I guess, is the question mark. I mean, it could always be a 2 months after the launch of Switch 2 still as a cross-gen title. But though we saw more of the game here in terms of its context, importance to Nintendo, and context in the release calendar of this year, today actually answered no questions and maybe introduced more.
I agree, and I think, to me, this trailer reaffirmed in some ways why I think that the cross-gen conversation is silly, because it obviously looks astounding on the platform, and moreover, it doesn't look like the sort of game that's going to catch fire if it's on Switch 2. As excited as I am about it, that looks like, as Prime has always been, a very methodical, very puzzle-heavy, first-person exploration game. That's not a very popular genre. Even if you just look at the Indiana Jones game, which had a marquee IP attached to it, it wasn't a massive success. I just think that people are not quite seeing it the way I see it, in terms of what this game could the success it could find on Switch 2 that it can't find on Switch 1. But ultimately, my position, my bullish position on only Switch 1 for this game has certainly been softened by the fact that there was no release date today.
I think that's fair.
I still think it could go either way. I still think it's too soon to say for sure that it's just a Switch 1 game, but I err on the side of seeing it next week at this point.
Yeah, and we will certainly see. And if it, I think, obviously, we will have much more information by the time the Switch 2 Direct is finished. If it's not there, it's not a Switch 2 game. It is a game that we will get a release date for later in the year at a summer showcase of some kind. Or, I mean, you joked about it earlier, but release date could be dropped on the Nintendo Today app. Do we want to talk about that now?
Let's talk about the app. What do you make of the app? First of all, did you download the app?
I did. Okay. Very little on there.
Yes.
As of now. So an app called Nintendo Today launched today. And it is a calendar for Nintendo news. Now, I think it's funny that they call it a calendar, because all it does is tell you what fucking day it is.
So
if you're on a smartphone, before you unlock your phone, it tells you what day it is.
There's a lot of stuff. I won't click that third tab because I have my personal information in it, but there's like, they'll give you updates here about various things. They give you news. You can read a little, like, a Pikmin comic, which is cute, because this is actually really cool, because these are just still comics that were only in Japanese before.
Oh, cool.
And now
they translated them and animated them. Very interesting.
By the way,
I'll take those a look earlier.
Continues my agenda that we're getting the Pikmin game soon.
Well, to that point, when you launch the app, you are given the opportunity to pick through 5 different styles: Mario, Zelda, Splatoon, Pikmin, and Animal Crossing.
Of course, I picked Pikmin.
Yeah, and so did I. Yeah, I mean, I think Pikmin is going to be a lot bigger going to Switch 2 because it's the only one of those 4 franchises that isn't a 10 million seller.
I really think the extent to which Pikmin has been pushed as of late, I don't think it's impossible to see Pikmin next week. But that's, again, we're going to do a whole separate discussion about...
Yeah. And we will probably do a predictions video.
Yes.
This weekend or something.
But the app was framed in a very interesting way. Yeah. It was the final thing of the Direct.
Miyamoto was there, and everybody clapped.
Yeah, Miyamoto was there, and the preamble he gave...
Miyamoto was there, and everybody golfed.
We'll get to that, too. The preamble he gave was so interesting. He talked about this as a supplement for Nintendo Directs. And what it made me think of is the GOAT, the greatest Nintendo YouTuber of all time, Nintendo Forecast, had a video many months ago about, like, will Nintendo phase out Directs?
Yeah.
And I thought it was such an improbable idea. But the language they used was not that this is replacing Directs, because they still said we're going to have them, but it sounds like this is going to be a critical way to get Nintendo news.
Yeah.
What do you make of that?
The interesting thing about that is I, for the moment, don't believe that major news that would have been a Direct will be put here. I think it will be a way to aggregate that and remind people of stuff that was in Directs. But I think what it primarily is a way for them to more control their announcements via their own platform. Nintendo has actually been very consistent about using social media to share new information of all kinds, of all scales over the course, especially of the Switch generation. But that they have this pretty consistent schedule of when they upload new tweets, which sometimes have new information. There's a pretty consistent schedule of when NSO drops happen, when Alarmo updates happen, when Nintendo Music updates happen. And if you think about this, and plus that sometimes they announce games on social media. This is like 5 different kinds of streams of information that people may not be familiar with because it's not centralized in any way. I mean, it is centralized, but on someone else's platform, of course, a platform that Nintendo is moving away from. We saw them make it impossible to upload photos from your Switch to Twitter. They disconnected that sometime last year. And so I think this app will now be the go-to place for an MEO style trailer drop, for a NSO drop, for a Nintendo Music update, for, I mean, probably not like joke little tweets about Donkey Kong or whatever, which they've done a lot of. But yeah, I think that that's the kind of information that will come here. And what I hope then is that incentivizes them to be a little bit more consistent with their with the variety of cadence of information that they have, because they have so much to talk about, all of the different kinds of platforms and areas, and it can all be shown off here in a way that they can control the presentation. They don't have people spamming where Switch 2 in the comments. And I don't know if I will grow to use this over seeing this information, because you assume they'd still end up posting the information on social media, though it'd be fucking crazy if they didn't, and that would really push people to move to this. But I'm really fascinated to see how this impacts us as people who are really hungry for every NSO drop, for every Nintendo Music update, if it's going to change the way that we interact with Nintendo. But it'll be, how much do they lean into this? That will be the deciding factor. It's really not on us. It's on them to make this a thing.
Yeah, that's the important point here, because I don't think you can view this in a similar way to Nintendo Music, which is something Nintendo has done to try to capture like a lifestyle, be more of a lifestyle thing. I don't really think that's what Nintendo today is.
No,
I think
this is a hardcore thing.
Yeah, and I think it's a response in part, but not in full, to the completely eroding social media landscape. Yeah, there's a component of that for sure. I don't think that Nintendo is like morally opposed to posting on Twitter. No. Because basically every company still does, because there's no other option. But I would imagine that most companies are having discussions. I mean, we had them at Lost and Cult about what do you do? How do you reach the audience if Twitter just totally collapses? Yeah. Because Instagram's not a great replacement. Facebook's not a great replacement. YouTube's not a great replacement. If Nintendo can curate an app that most critically can send a push notification to you when they announce something is up for pre-order or is something new for you to check out or whatever, that's really valuable. It's like how newsletter campaigns are really valuable. So I think that that's part of what Nintendo is doing, and I think another part of it is just trying to reorganize how they distribute information, because there's no rhyme or reason to it right now, and I don't think
absolutely.
that there suddenly will be because of this app, but I think that they're suddenly going to.
There's incentive too.
Yes, that's exactly the thing. Yeah.
There's not. God, I mean, the amount of times that I've had to just like get a message from you or send a message to you and be like, they just announced like a new video game. Like what?
Yeah.
Like how do we cover this? What's going on? Like just out of nowhere. This will make it so that, especially if you and I have push notifications on for this, we will receive the information as soon as Nintendo shares it with the world. But we're like 2 hours into this thing existing. The only stuff on there is, I think you can watch the direct through there, or at least you can link to it. They have that comic, and they said they're going to just be like little fun, like character bits and stuff, and
just
there's
like
animations
and stuff, and then like Ochi moves around, or like he won't do it.
No, he
now.
doesn't.
He's
doesn't
shy.
want to.
There he goes. But there's one other thing we have to say about this app, Tucker, which is, again, goes back to my thesis that this show was subtextually about Switch 2.
Yeah.
They had said that every day after the release, or after the Nintendo Direct, up until the release of the system, there's going to be a new piece of Switch 2 information.
Yeah. That's crazy.
It is. That's a crazy thing to say.
Well, they said they're going to be sharing news daily.
Sure.
I think that there's a chance that, especially for the week or 10 days following it, that it is still just recaps and slightly deeper dives into the things that they covered in the Direct. Because I think it would be really weird for them to have this massive Direct and then to be holding back major information like release dates, or heaven forbid even fucking game announcements, to put them on this app that 2% of their audience will have been familiar with at that point.
I guess the thing about it is, like, they probably don't care about that, because anything that gets posted to the app is immediately going to get posted to every news platform.
Well, of course.
And so I could see a world where Nintendo says, okay, we want to generate excitement around the app. We're going to start putting critical pieces of information in here.
Man, it'd be crazy. It'd be so different.
Which is, again, why I am so skeptical of this no date for Metroid Prime 4 thing, and why I still think that there's a chance that it's not actually cross-gen, that's just going to show up on the app. I really say it's going to show up on the app.
Yeah.
Maybe that's just me speculating randomly, but I really think that if I were in Nintendo's marketing department, and I was like, how do we get people to care about the app? We give them information that's actually valuable.
Yeah, no, it's true. It's true.
And then it incentivizes people to not wait and see, see the VGC post. Oh, Nintendo just said on the Nintendo Today app that Metroid is coming out in May. Mm-hmm. They just know, okay, I need to have that on my phone, so I'm there when that happens. I think it could be a fundamental shift in how Nintendo does their business. And
the craziest part is, we weren't expecting that.
No.
We weren't expecting that today. We especially weren't expecting it to be the closer of a Nintendo Direct. And again, that combined with this digital game card sharing thing makes this Direct feel even weirder than other Directs. I mean, despite, I think, poor pacing and lack of release dates and a meager slate of not only new game announcements but third-party games, I think the two extraneous pieces of information that they slotted into the final Switch 1 Nintendo Direct makes this this is the real keystone of why this is the weirdest Nintendo Direct.
Yeah, it's more of a transitional Direct than it is a final send up to Switch 2, because I think we got to talk about this virtual game card system.
Yeah. How well do you understand it?
I understand it pretty well because I've read a couple articles about it now.
Okay, good. So I did not do that preparation.
Let me essentially aggregate all this information down. What Nintendo is doing is essentially introducing, as they tend to, a intuitive, and I use the word intuitive because they're mirroring a real world thing. It's like a skeuomorphic design idea. They're turning the idea of game sharing into and let me start over here. Because I think it's important to understand this. Virtual game cards are a way to do game sharing that they have papered over with this cute idea of making people think of their digital game as a tangible one-of-one copy of that game. Essentially, what you can do with this, and to be clear, and as we read in some articles, all of your digital games
Yeah.
are going to become virtual game cartridges starting in April.
Yeah.
What you can do with them is you can link your first Switch, your primary Switch, to another. I have. Hold on.
How many Switches? Just one? Are you reading the information right now?
Wait, because we got hot news on the ground here.
What's happening?
This is straight from Nintendo about virtual game cards here.
Okay.
And there's an asterisk at the bottom of the page that I think is important that Dan just shouted out.
Okay.
I'm trying to think of the best way to explain this. Let me finish the conceptual thing, and we'll get to what Dan just sent.
Yeah.
Basically, you're going to have these digital game cards that are one-to-one of your digital games.
Yes.
You can then link your Switch to a second Switch.
Yeah.
For me, it'll be my Switch and then Jean's Switch Lite.
Mm-hmm.
And you can freely trade, quote unquote, your digital games back and forth. And like it's a physical cartridge, it will temporarily leave your Switch, arrive in the other Switch, and vice versa, as though it's a native game. So there's no need to download to do an online check when you're trying to download or launch the game. It is essentially like you've transferred it to one system to the other. Mm-hmm. That can happen between two linked systems as much as you want. The games can stay on one for however long you want.
Yeah.
And it's that simple. It can also work with a family plan. However, if it's somebody on a family plan versus the one other linked system you have, you can transfer a game over a wireless connection to the other person, and they can hold on to it for 2 weeks, and then it returns back.
Oh, okay. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. So, like, if we went...
Is that the asterisk?
The asterisk... No.
Oh, shit. Okay, we're still getting there.
But that's essentially the system. What they're doing is giving you a way to make the idea of game sharing into tangible, as though you're sharing a physical copy. I think for most people, they see this news and like, what the fuck are you talking about? What is this? Why does this matter at all? For me, for my niche use case, it's very, very useful. Yeah. Because I buy all my games digitally. So Jean has to, if she wants to play something I have to go into airplane mode. She has to launch the game, right, via my account on her Switch. And it's really, really inconvenient. It does not work especially well. It's suitable. It's functional, but it's far from ideal.
It's allowed you, me, and Jean through different amalgams of game sharing to play many games that we would have had to buy multiple copies of otherwise.
Yeah, and it's just like and it's been frustrating because obviously what Nintendo wants to do is crack down on that behavior happening between people who aren't me, my girlfriend, and you, right?
Yeah.
So what this is a way to do that more legitimately and more successfully. It's basically what I think the idea of a family plan has been building towards. So for me, this is actually really, really, really exciting. Yeah. I know that for most it's not, but for me it's huge.
There's two major question marks for this. Yeah. Number one, if it then ends up replacing the system that we have been using for me to like launch a game through your account that I have logged onto my Switch and just play it through your account, but it's a different save, all of that, which is kind of complicated, but we've had so many years to get used to it that it's worked for us very well over the course of the last few years. If it replaces that would definitely change the way that I'm approaching purchasing and sharing games, but that's wait and see. Yeah. And then the other thing that I think this is the most crucial part about this, because you're right, for your specific use case, not only the situation that you're in, but also the kind of person that you are in terms of knowledge about Nintendo, this is perfect for you. This is something that is so new and so relatively complicated that for the people that this is most useful to, which is a pair of siblings, a pair of spouses that just want to buy one copy of the game, be able to share it with one another. Yeah. How is Nintendo going to make it obvious to these people that they can do this, and here is how you do this? It has to be on the Switch somehow. There has to be some sort of guide on the Switch to teach you how to do this, to make sure that you know that it is something you can do, and here's how you do it.
So I think there definitely is going to be, because I'm just looking at the official page for this, and as they said in the Direct, but I think we kind of passed over it because we were trying to figure out what the fuck was going on, there is a dedicated virtual game card icon being added to your home screen.
Interesting, on the very bottom of the screen. Yeah, I see that. Yep.
So that's going to make it a lot clearer, and I'm assuming there's going to be these little tutorials and pop-ups in there for people.
Yeah, definitely.
Which is good. Again, I think this is a good thing. And as a broader point, I think the idea of treating a digital game more similar to a physical game is a good step forward for a better digital ecosystem on the whole.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Now, the thing that Dan Parr raised, and I'm curious.
Okay, here's the asterisk.
Yeah, and this is something we're literally just seeing. We've not had time to really think about here. But there is a double asterisk mention here.
Yeah.
And it reads, compatible systems must be linked to a Nintendo account to use virtual game cards, as we talked about.
Yes.
Nintendo Switch 2 exclusive games, and this is the important part, Nintendo Switch 2 edition games can only be loaded on a Nintendo Switch 2 system. To move virtual games between two systems, you must pair systems via local wireless and internet connection, but only when pairing the systems for the first time.
Up to 2 systems total can be linked per Nintendo account.
Yeah. But the important part here is the Nintendo Switch 2 edition games.
Yeah.
That's not a terminology we've heard before.
No. Well, I mean, it's really... I think this implies games that are cross-generation in some way, right? Like you go onto the PlayStation Store, you download a game, you get the option to download PS4, PS5 games. Of course, most of it depends on what console you're on, what version you're going to want to download. But I think what's curious then, if this does indicate that there will be games either from Nintendo or from partners that are that have simultaneous Switch 1 and Switch 2 SKUs that are slightly different for the different hardware. If you buy a digital, specifically a copy of one of these games, do you get access to both of them in the way that you do on Xbox and PlayStation, where it's technically both versions of the game? You get to choose which one you use.
Yeah, I mean, it raises the question. What this signals to me is that something is cross-gen, as you're saying.
Yeah, something. Yeah,
probably Metroid Prime. We'll just say, for the sake of what we're going to talk about here, it is Metroid Prime.
Mm-hmm.
What you're raising is an important question that I don't think we'll know next week, obviously. But is there one eShop? And is there one eShop that when you go on it on Switch 2, you are intrinsically going to download the Switch 2 version of the game?
Yeah.
Are they going to be separate SKUs? Yeah, edition. I guess there's new terminology we have to know now. Yeah. But this is also why, Tucker, I think people who expect like a shit ton of game announcements next week are going to be disappointed, because I think that there's going to be a lot of almost like clerical work we have to go through next week of explaining this stuff, of explaining how the eShop is going to work, how you transfer data from your current Switch to your new one, how getting the right version of the game is going to function, all of this stuff. So to me, this is just another tease of the fact that next week we are getting not just a new piece of hardware, but a new ecosystem in a broad sense.
Yeah, I agree with that, because I think the stipulation of edition and that being something that's only applicable to certain kinds of hardware, I think it does probably also mean that that Switch 1 games, digital Switch 1 games, can obviously be loaded onto a Switch 2. That's obviously not really particularly big news, but I think that this implies, from first blush, just reading this, that it will operate differently from the way if you purchase Horizon Forbidden West, you'd get technically digital copies of the PS4 and PS5 versions. Because if you buy a Switch 2 version of Metroid Prime 4 digitally, and then technically you would have a Switch 1 version, and it wouldn't really matter that you bought the Switch 2 edition. And so I don't know, or maybe it just means that like you do get both, but you can't put the Switch 2 version onto your Switch 1. Who the hell knows?
It's going to be complicated. And again, this is why I really think that we got a little bit of a taste of what next week is going to be like in this virtual game share thing. Sure. Yeah. I bet there's going to be 4 sections like that next week about here's information about how you use the thing. Mm-hmm. So we'll see, but that's another sidebar. Again, to me, this is really cool. It's like it's a Nintendo version of it, but it genuinely is a smart way that solves a specific problem I have, which I like, and I'm glad that they're doing this. But
I like it when you have problems.
Yeah, I know. I know you hate it when they get solved. So
damn it.
We'll move on to the other 2 things, which we've been talking about, again, through this Direct, even though it was a Switch 1 Direct, through the broad paradigm of it being about Switch 2, but there were 2 games announced, specifically for Switch 1, the 2 big announcements that we both are very excited about. Tucker, where do you want to begin with these games?
Let's talk about Rhythm Heaven. Rhythm Heaven is the perfect example in its existence and concept of what I like a lot about late era Switch, and mirroring the energy, variety, creativity, and risk that someone like you really loves about Nintendo in general, is their willingness to continually support, and especially in the Switch era, revisit old IP that just give us something that we totally thought was dead, and seemingly, again, we only saw about a minute and a half, 2 minutes of it, seemingly be the exact thing that the hardcore fans want from that thing, which is from the ground up, new HD Rhythm Heaven game coming to your Nintendo Switch for you to play. And so it's something that I did not expect. We're in this situation with Endless Ocean and Famicom Detective Club and another code coming back where there's nothing off the table. And so I shouldn't have been particularly surprised by this in terms of, this is definitely a tier above all those other ones in terms of notoriety. But I was definitely surprised in that it's a new game, and I honestly God expected no new games to be announced here. Our discussion yesterday, and the discussion I had with Dan and Bo last night, was primarily like, what the smartest thing Nintendo could do right now is to announce a bunch of ports and remasters and things that are going to fill out the calendar in terms of new game on shelf that they can market, but not necessarily new games, because those are the ones they should be saving for Switch 2 to make that library feel more robust. The Switch does not need more original games. It has so many, it has plenty. But they took the exact opposite route of that, which is both of the games they announced today are ground up original games in franchises that haven't been relevant for a decade. And we got no ports, no remakes, no announcements of that kind. But I think Rhythm Heaven Groove looks like a lot of fun. It doesn't look like anything particularly new, because you could have mixed that footage in with other Rhythm Heaven games and you really wouldn't have been able to tell. But that's not necessarily a problem, because again, this is a series that's been gone for so long. The last game was Mega Mix, that was also just like Warrior Gold, a compilation of older content. So it has been 15 years since Fever, or will have been by the time the game comes out. Because that's the other asterisk. This game's been coming out for a year. God damn it, what the hell? This should be a game that comes out 2 months from now. This should be right before the Switch 2 comes out. What is happening?
Yeah, we should be playing this the first week of April.
Yeah.
And so I'm not a massive Rhythm Heaven fan. I've played Rhythm Tengoku, which I think intrinsically makes me a larger Rhythm Heaven fan than a lot of people, because that's a Japanese only GBA one, but I've played that, and I played Mega Mix. It's so delightful that this series is back. And I want to read a quick Blue Sky post here from Imran Khan, who said, so for people who don't know the series, Rhythm Heaven was on ice for so long because the composer Sunku was diagnosed with laryngeal cancer in 2014 and had part of his vocal cords removed, that they made a big note of him coming back for this one is actually kind of a big deal. Because we do see at the end of this trailer that this guy
Sunku is working on it,
is working on it, and also that TNX, who's made all the Rhythm Heaven games in partnership with SPD1, who has become, I forget which EPD group SPD1 was suffused into, but
I can find my fucking graphic that I made, the flowchart.
But it's the original. It is the original people here.
I think it's EPD7. That's where my mind goes. But
EPD7.
I just want to make sure I'm right about that. It also doesn't matter, because the interesting thing about this is in the credit at the bottom of the game's announcement is showing name, year, and then who's involved in it. It is Nintendo, Tsunku, and RTX.
TNX.
What the fuck? TNX. But the interesting thing about that is that's actually not different from the other previous games in the Rhythm Heaven series. That is the exact group of collaborators that has made those previous games, and so this is not a handing X franchise off to Mages or to Arc System Works or to Arte Piazza or one of these things. This is a new, ostensibly a new in-house Nintendo game, as in-house Nintendo games as the original Rhythm Heaven games were. And so, and that's another thing that totally makes this surprising to me is I especially was not expecting original games for Switch 1 from Nintendo's personal teams.
Yeah.
And this seems to be that. But the reason I stipulate it doesn't really matter which EPD group it is because it's probably just a couple of producers or developers from one of the teams. It ultimately has no bearing who actually is working on it.
You are right, by the way. That was a great call. It is EPD 7.
Boom, Steel Trap. Rusty's still trapped. Sometimes shit gets out of there, but still trapped nonetheless.
That's true. I was just curious because I don't know. I mean, because it's been so long since Megamex, I don't know to what extent the people are still at Nintendo. Like, if I was just looking at Rhythm Heaven Megamex on mobile games, the director is Masami Yone, I'm not sure, who is seemingly at he last game he worked on was Nintendo World Championships and Brain Age Academy Brain versus Brain.
Okay, yeah.
So those games are being worked on by Indie Zero, right?
Yes. And
also EPD 7. I think they collaborated on them.
I don't think it's 7. I think it's a different group, but it doesn't. Again,
yeah, no, it's not 7. I forget. We got to do a little bit. I think the point is we need to do a little bit more research. Obviously, we're recording this pretty soon on the back of the direct here, but the point is that you're raising is a key one. We were saying yesterday it's going to be these partner teams that are bringing out the games for this late era, but indeed it's not.
Yeah.
Obviously TNX is, but we have this, and then we have the other game, which we can just bring into conversation, I think, which is Tomodachi.
Hold on. Do you have anything to say about Rhythm Heaven Groove in particular?
I do, but I think I think it's an important point.
Okay.
Tomodachi Life Living the Dream, which I'm also super excited about, assumedly is maybe being made by an internal team as well.
Yeah, man.
We don't know. This is one we don't know about.
Yeah.
But yeah, as it relates to Groove in particular, there's not too much to say about it, just insofar as that it is Rhythm Heaven. It's more Rhythm Heaven.
Yeah.
And that's great. It's been so long, as you're saying, and having the original vocalist back is really exciting. So I can't wait for this game, but I have to. And I just think that it's silly to put this in 2026. I don't.
What that obviously means is that the game's not done. I think it might even be like earlier on in production than we would hope for something like this. But that's what that really does indicate to me, because I don't think they're like delaying it out of the year or like pushing it to
sitting on it.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think they're sitting on it. But it is still weird that it was shown today, both of these games, because this is not only do we have no dated games for Nintendo, not Switch 1, not Switch 2, nothing. But especially no Switch 1 games. And early in the year directs are, I think, almost never the time that they've announced a game that's going to be coming out the next year. It'll sometimes be summer, and it'll usually be the fall direct that we get even if it's undated, this is coming next year. And in those situations, we're like, okay, it's happened enough. That's like, it's cool that we're seeing this. We'll get to see it again at the next direct, whether that is the fall one or the next spring, and then the game will come out, and that's fine. This adds a layer of question of how long is it going to be until we see it, and how vague that 2026 is. Very, very vague. Does it mean that these games they could be early in the year, or they might just be 2026 and we see one of them in May of next year?
You see one in December of next year.
It's true. Yeah.
I mean, and because it's just it's frustrating to me, because not only do I feel like we've really become conditioned by Nintendo to expect a game they announce out within 4 months, 7 months of its announcement.
Yeah.
I just wish that they weren't using these games, Tomodachi Life and Rhythm Heaven, to indicate to people that that Switch is going to have games in 2026. I wish they were doing it with some kind of Mario thing, and it's not just me on my anti-Mario agenda, but just generally, if you're a passerby, if you're an average Switch owner, you don't even know what these franchises are.
No, of course not.
And so what does this say to you? It doesn't say anything. I think you're right, or at least I'll put it to you this way. It would make me sleep easier at night if I knew that they were still working on Rhythm Heaven Groove and Tomodachi Life Living the Dream for the next year, opposed to having them done now. If we get to like March of next year, and let's just say Rhythm Heaven's coming out in March, I don't know. Let's just say it's a calendar year away.
Yeah.
If we find out from the Australian classifications whether the game was done in like July, I'm gonna freak out. But if I can put that to the side, it's a massive caveat. But again, I just think that Rhythm Heaven is such a joyful series.
Yeah.
I don't have a very good sense of rhythm. Jean has an amazing one. We have fun passing Rhythm Heaven back and forth. And I'm hoping that there's some co-op in this one. It looked like
very, very possible.
Yeah. It looked like to me with these processions of 4 characters, you might be able to have another one in there. Obviously, people haven't played Rhythm Heaven. A lot of it is playing sort of follow the leader with other characters in the scene. So because there's 4 characters in any of these rhythm games we saw, doesn't mean that all 4 of those are controllable.
No.
By any stretch of imagination. If anything, it's safer to assume the opposite. That's just one player.
Yes.
But I can't imagine that they'd release a Switch Rhythm Heaven game without some kind of multiplayer.
No, I absolutely think there'll be a multiplayer. So,
yeah, I really can't wait for this. This is the kind of wonderfully niche, special Nintendo series. It makes me love the company so much and why I've loved it for decades. So I can't wait for that. And Tomodachi Life.
Well, hold on. Quickly about Groove again. Weird that it's a year away. I'm excited for the game. Terrible trailer. The way that they showed off this game was very slowly walking you through the tutorial for the game and showing the little person's hand in the corner holding a switch and pressing A, and it was just painfully slow, and it had this weird like slow load in of like, this is a game that's not very epic, but it's kind of goofy, and you're like, and we were like, because we understood that this is a 15-year-old series of Nintendo's historical importance that's coming back, that appeals to us as the niche nerds. But if you are a Nintendo fan who's not interested in this game, this trailer does nothing for you. It doesn't get you jazzed to play this game. There's kind of like a more compilation-y, quicker edited thing near the end that I think is a better way to show off a game like this to the uninitiated. But especially if you are not a fan of this game, I think this trailer just annoyed you. I think a lot of people wouldn't recognize the art necessarily, the art style of like the blank white characters, and I think that a lot of people might not even necessarily know this is a Nintendo game or a Nintendo franchise, because it is something that has been gone for so long. And so I think that there's a chance that this hurts the popularity of that game. The first blush reaction for a lot of people is, what is this? Why is it taking so much of the direct? Why is it so slow? It's super, super weird. And then I'm not going to be able to play it for a year. People are going to forget about this.
Yeah, I agree with you in the broad strokes, but I also think at the same time, the point of it being a year away kind of cuts against the fact that this trailer matters that much.
Yeah, well, because we'll get another one that'll probably be a little bit more exciting. But
but I agree with you. Like, we recognize it immediately as Rhythm Heaven. But if you don't, it's like, what's the point? But also the fact that they were showing, like, with the UI prompts, here's a button to press, like, this game has got to be done. They're showing the beginning of the game. We're gonna get to play this. We could be playing this today, maybe. And then no, we're playing it in probably a year. Which is a shame. But Tomodachi Life,
yes, living the dream, baby.
I love Tomodachi Life on 3DS. It's one of my favorite 3DS games.
Yeah.
And I'd given up the hope. Bo was keeping the hope alive. I was calling it copium. But it wasn't copium. The game is here. And hopium, yes, sorry, not copium.
No, I said bopium. But the game is here.
That's a good point.
This game is also in 2026.
I just want to note something here to you, Tucker. I'm just looking at their Twitter numbers here, right, for the games they showed off today. 11,000 likes on the Legends ZA trailer, respectable. 20,000 likes on Metroid Prime 4 Beyond's trailer. 34,000 likes on Rhythm Heaven trailer. 111,000 likes on the trailer for this game.
That's remarkable.
This game is going to be a big deal. For sure. I think that, as Bo says, people underestimate this game. Tomodachi Life 1 on 3DS was a massive seller. Yeah. I want to say it sold something like 7 million units, although I can fact check that in a second here. But it's just such a fucking bizarre series. It's obviously a predecessor on
6.7.
There's a predecessor on DS called Tomodachi Collection. Largely, Tomodachi Life is just an English version of that game with more features, but there's some differences. But to have a brand new...
It was an HD remake.
Yeah. It was what, like a 360p remake? To have a brand new one here that looks markedly different
Oh yeah.
is so exciting. And the fact that this one's 2026 stings even more than Rhythm Heaven because I
Yeah.
genuinely love Tomodachi Life.
Yeah. Um, I actually don't really enjoy Tomodachi Life on 3DS. But that doesn't really it makes me not as like personally like, oh my god, this is something I love and now I'm seeing it come back that you and Bo particularly felt. But not that doesn't hurt my excitement or enjoyment, potential enjoyment of this game because we don't know what this game is like. And I think this is again another one where a an odd trailer, not a. I think the Rhythm Heaven was a pretty bad trailer, all things considered. But this was definitely an odd trailer, though matching the odd tone of the game. That's fair enough. But the interesting thing is, we only saw like a minute of this game, and again, it's 2026. This is game wise, this is what they closed out on. So I think a lot of people were going to come out of this direct very, very confused. But I also am just really curious to learn more about this because Tomodachi Life is such a flexible concept, and this seems at least uh, visually and from the island wise structurally different that I don't really know what this game is going like how different it's going to be. Um, it could just be a visual overhaul, and really you're doing a similar set of actions and interactions that they had in the previous games. But I think it's also again a flexible enough concept to where they can add more things that are like specific mini games. I really do think my biggest belief for this game is that it's going to be a lot more social focused, and you'll actually be able to visit other players' islands, and they can share like on like a social message board, like the things that that their Miis saw or said or something like that, and you can maybe send your Miis or collect your friends' Miis to exist in your town. I really think that that game's wackiness mixed with a little bit more of a social emphasis will be the selling point of this game, and why even though I didn't really vibe with the 3DS one, this one is going to be totally different because especially around launch, the vibe of all of us sharing our presumably sharing our Miis with one another and sharing clips on social media, that is perfect for this game. But we saw so little of it that we don't know how different or the same this game is going to be.
The good news is what we did see was fucking weird. I mean, we see these massive Miis show up, right? And for people who didn't play Tomodachi Life, it was in some ways tailored perfectly to that experience you were talking about, but just a little bit too early to it. Tomodachi Life is such a viral game. Your Miis will have dreams where like they're being chased around by a cereal box that's tied to a string to their shoe, and there's like people singing them weird lullabies. And like your Miis will fall in love and like go fucking on dates on a Ferris wheel or like literally kick rocks and walk along the beach when they're sad. Like that game is so fucking weird. Or they'll like play Virtual Boy and others will like do ritualistic jumping and chanting around them. Like if that game had come out a little later, I think it would have been primed to that viral experience you're talking about.
100%.
So I'm sure they're going to lean into it. But the other thing about Tomodachi Life is because it was really a god game. I mean, you really didn't have much direct interaction at all. It was perfect for 3DS because like I would play it for literally 10 minutes a day, 20 minutes a day, like coming to and from school or whatever. But obviously this is on the Switch and it has to pull double duty as a handheld game and a home console game. So I think that's going to also invite a more direct scale of interaction, or at least just more ambition in the types of things you can do in the game. So I can't wait for it. I did just a quick check. This game was also developed by Nintendo SPD1, now EPD7. It'll be interesting to see who's making this. I have a theory that it could be Grezzo. We were talking with Bo and Dan earlier today, right after the direct, about it repurposing the crazy Mii Maker from
we didn't
Miitopia.
see that in the trailer. We didn't see any particularly crazy looking Miis. But I think it's very, very, very likely.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you can if let's just imagine that's true. You know, if you're thinking about Grezzo as a team that we know made Echoes of Wisdom, and even if people have qualms with it, we both love that game. And obviously there was a good working relationship, a good progression of their relationship. So if Grezzo's working on this, I think Grezzo gets bought by Nintendo, and I think that would be a wonderful and smart acquisition. Again, this is all hypothetical, but either it's someone like a Grezzo who made Miitopia, or it's internal, which is just interesting, that the idea that into 2026 we're going to get new, at least in some way, largely steered by EPD Group, games, which is really,
Yeah.
really cool.
Definitely. Yeah, I'm really fascinated to learn more about this game, but it again, both of the games new games we saw today are perfectly emblematic of, and for me, ideally emblematic of the position that Nintendo is in right now.
Yeah.
The thing that I said yesterday was I really hope that we're talking about Kirby and Metroid and collections and Fire Emblems and ports and remakes, and I was going to be interested in some of them. They did the exact opposite of what I thought they would do, because they leaned into things that were surprising, even for Nintendo fans. The source of them is surprising. The release date is surprising. The length of time between entries is surprising, and it's because Nintendo is in such a confident financial position right now that they're willing to take risks and give smaller teams and particularly creators like Tsunku a chance to continue their visions and put it onto a platform with a massive audience with massive relevance, which some of these series have only been partially available, given access to. That I from that angle, this was the ideal late era Switch Direct for me. I expected one very predictable thing with mostly reutilized content. They went the exact opposite of that. And they revitalized games and series that you and I are very interested in, that add that frankly also add like potential new recurring series for Nintendo to do going forward. I think that if Tsunku's in not great health, maybe this is the last one that he works on, but if they see this as a success, maybe they can have someone working alongside him to then lead another game that can be turned around in 2 to 3 years, mid-generation of the next system, and another Tomodachi Life for specifically Switch 2 could be 4 years after that, like or 4 years after 2026. Like, we're talking about games that are definitely down the road, but the fact that Nintendo is willing to try these things again means that they're not dead series, and we could see them continued forward, which is just so exciting for the variety of Nintendo. And again, one thing that we've given them a lot of credit for across this generation is raising the profile of their B and C and D tier series. And these two absolutely fit into that.
I agree. Yeah, so I mean, ultimately, like, I don't have anything to add beyond what you said. I think that, it was just a strange day.
Yeah.
It's a strange day that I think it's going to have large implications on the rest of the year. But really, we're not going to be able to paint any kind of clear picture at all until next week. But obviously, it is only next week, and it's crazy that we'll be back in, 7 days for another 6 days. 6 days for another Nintendo Direct reaction and discussion of even larger consequence.
Of magnitudes more consequence. The other smaller things, there were 2 games today that are based on Japan Studio IP, a collection of Patapon 1 and 2 called Patapon 1, or no, just Patapon Replay or something like that.
1+2 replay or something like that.
Again, announced in a Nintendo Direct.
Yeah.
Crazy. Insane. Games are fun, and I would play them. I mean, I won't buy this because I can just play them, the HD versions on my PS Plus. But it's so cool that Sony is lending out their IP, and it's even stranger, more interesting, and potentially exciting that they know that the audience for these Japan Studio weirder games is actually with Nintendo, and the Nintendo audience and the Switch audience, and they're being marketed primarily as Nintendo games. And so that is Patapon, but then there's also a published by Bandai Namco, specifically licensed by Sony, and then Bandai Namco also publishing and developing, it seems, a new Everybody's Golf game, which is a series that's been dead for years. Very interesting that Clap Hands isn't involved. I bet they're fucking pissed about that. But again, revealed in Nintendo Direct, a new Everybody's Golf game, which is one of the longest running Sony franchises ever. And then it just disappeared, and the Japan Studio fucking went to the ether. Yeah. And now Nintendo gets the primary marketing through Bandai Namco for the next game in this fucking legendary golf series.
Yeah, it's something that I think we ought to consider a separate discussion for, actually.
Sure, yeah.
Because we've also, this is the third in a sequence with Freedom Wars, which I really liked on Vita like a decade ago.
Yeah.
And now it's back on all platforms. And yeah, I don't know. I think that this is something we got to stew on for a little bit.
Sure.
And really dive into, because I think it's extremely interesting.
Yeah.
That PlayStation.
And it's also extremely exciting because
it's extremely exciting. Imagine Parappa coming over.
Yeah. Loco Roco, Ape Escape. Oh my god.
Halo Escape would be perfect. Oh no.
Yeah.
Well, they would all be perfect, but I meant to say Loco Roco would be especially perfect.
Yeah, definitely.
But Tucker.
Oh, did you want me to end it there? Oh, I think you did.
I just wanted to breathe in